Hey, kia ora koutou whānau. Welcome back to a brand new week and a brand new edition of Big Hairy News. Chewy, sir, good evening to you.
Welcome, fellow kids. How is everyone today?
I'm doing good, mate. It's honestly really bizarre. It feels like it's been a really long time since we've done a show. As a lot of people here know, if not everybody, I was away for the weekend, and the idea of not working every day of the week. So I switched off so much so that one of the clips we're going to play today, they're talking about a shooting that happened at a rugby game. I knew nothing about it. That was the first I'd heard of it. I switched off enough that I didn't know anything about it until I watched Brooke Van Velden put on her 1950s housewife language up against Chloe Swarbrick this morning. That was the first, and when I say this morning, I watched it this evening. So I completely got a chance to unplug and get away, and just didn't. I didn't think it was possible. So it feels like honestly feels like it's been ages.
But this is something that might also be something for our listeners, watchers to reflect on as well. Sometimes you got to decompress, man. Like when I went away at the start of the year and I was just like completely unplugged from news and that sort of thing. You got to be fair on yourself and sort of go, I can't immerse myself in this all the time.
Yeah.
It's not healthy for a start.
Yeah.
And it's just makes everything so hard to bear. You got to pick your battles.
Yeah. And I mean, like, to be honest, I had the same time off that I almost have every week, but just not doing anything. And when I say not doing anything, I mean not doing anything. You know, just hanging out, drinking liquids, eating foods, looking at sceneries, you know. And check out the sky. It was like that all weekend.
Now let me do something that annoys my partner endlessly whenever we go away, like somewhere beautiful like this. You're in Queenstown there, obviously. That's just normal, Pat. It's always like that. It's always been there. It's fine. Just normal scenery.
And I have an apology to make to you, Chewy, because you told me to go to a particular restaurant, wasn't it? Wasn't it you that told me to go to Flame?
I hadn't heard of Flame. I've been to a place called Botswana Butchery.
I went there as well. Oh, you talked about the South African place. Someone told me to go to Flame. And Flame is a place where they just keep delivering you meat on skewers. We went in and we got what they said was a 2-person shared meal of lots of samples of meat. The picture I'm about to show you is what was left over after we were Christmas full. You ready? That's what was left over.
So I assume you're apologising because you haven't brought me a doggy bag.
No, we actually had that for breakfast this morning. So, like, there's half a chicken there. There was 4 sets of ribs. There was a whole, like, circular South African sausage. There was a sirloin steak. There was potatoes. And that we ate, and then we stopped. And that was... And I said to the woman... the waitress, the server, I'm like, is this really just for 2 people? And she went, yeah, it's for 2 people, but they tend to move very slowly at the end of the meal. And I said, have you ever seen one person do it? Because I watched this guy called Beard Meets, Meat Meets Beard or something. He's a professional eater, and he goes and eats, pizzas that are this big and stuff. So I thought, I wonder if anyone, and she was like, never seen one person eat it, never ever. So yeah, but the good thing about that is it sustained us through the weekend. We had that for lunch on Saturday and breakfast this morning. So it was lovely. And it was very nice to get away for 4 days. How was your weekend?
Pretty tame. I had full intentions to go to a wonderful little festival, music festival here in Dunedin, and just completely bottled it. It's called Feastock. It's been going on since I was a student here 20 years ago. It is literally in someone's backyard. And there are about 3 bands that I really wanted to see. And then by the time I sort of got my shit together, I noticed one little thing, and that there was no pass out. So if you go in, you're there for the duration, and I have little dog to look after. So I was just like, I can't do it.
No. Yeah, there was one other thing that's news from the weekend. Shall I share, Chewy? You know what the news is.
I know what the news.
Shall I share one other thing?
I don't
He-
know. Just want to know? Maybe
You-
you should do your secret.
Yeah, you're sounding a little bit like you're
Maybe.
underwater. You've gone into that underwater mode briefly. You back? Talk to me.
Hello.
Yeah, that's better.
Check 1 2.
I'll
Yeah,
share. Here we go. There was one other thing during the weekend. I'll just show you a picture, see if you get the hint. There was that part of the weekend as well. Yeah. People on the
That's
audio,
very cryptic. How is anybody supposed to work that out?
people in the audio podcast aren't going to have a clue what's going on. Yes, finally, after 6 years of being with my partner, she's going to make an honest man of me. So that was other news from the weekend. It wasn't entirely the reason we went to Dunedin, but I guess I utilised being in, to Queenstown. I guess I utilised being in Queenstown as a time to think, oh, well, she's time. We had this conversation. People keep saying to her, because it's supposed to be romantic, oh, what did he do? How did he ask you? And because we're old and we have our own lives and both of us have our previous marriages, we kind of talked about it and we wanted to just clear a couple of things and think about what we think. And then I was just like, we'd like to get married. And she's like, oh, yeah. that was our big thing. And, of course, now everyone's asking to see the ring and it's off being sized. So she doesn't even have it. But we got it while we were up there. We bought it together. We went and found the one and we found the one that she liked and we bought it together.
It was that impromptu.
I was thinking about it. No, it wasn't impromptu. But I mean, you know, you're in your 40s and stuff. It feels a bit different for than, 20-year-olds doing this, and the man's going to make it, and the man will pick the ring, and it's like, we'll discuss it. And I said to her, should we get one before we leave? I like the idea of coming back with a ring, because it kind of signifies this event that happened in Queenstown, and we found the thing in Queenstown. But we went looking on Saturday morning and found one that she really liked, and did it there and then, and bought it. And then they said, you can't take it with you because we have to resize it. And I said, out of interest, if they had to make it bigger in resizing and you added more gold in, would you charge us more? And she said yes. So, of course, my next question was, because you're making it smaller, do you charge us less? And they said no. So, seems fair.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
And so I guess it's a good time to say, because now I have to figure out how to pay for a wedding, thanks to all our patrons. Thanks to all our patrons. Smooth, is that nice? Because basically we've been doing this for 18 months or so, 2 years, and all of that patronage has just paid for the weekend that's just gone. So now we're back to square one. And if I'm going to have another weekend like that in about 18 months from now, we just got to work it out. I'm just joshing with you folks. Thanks so much for being patrons if you're part of what we do and who we are. Patreon.com/Big Hairy News. Couple of new patrons over the weekend. Jezza down here as a patron on the patrons. Jezza Cook and Marianne have signed up to be a part of what we do. If you enjoy what we do, if you want to help us out, if you want to get alongside us in a way that's tangibly beneficial to us, then head to patreon.com/Big Hairy News. It genuinely really does help, and we thank you for it. And I'll even do that to remind you through the show what it's all about. So, there you go. I think that's my news from the weekend. Not going to be like this every Monday. There's not going to be news like this every Monday, just so you know.
We are going to live stream the wedding, though.
Oh, really? I know. Those conversations have already started going. I'm like, oh, gosh, that's right. That's what you do. Done this once before, but it's a bit different. Anyway, yes. So thank you. And I've seen all the text scrolling by there. Thanks for that. I'm sure I'll go and have a look at what you guys have all said in there. But it does kind of feel like, this is, especially you guys who are with us since the start, and for those guys who come on board and your patrons, you actually kind of helped us do what we do. And I did talk to my partner, and I just say that what we do, we are a community here, and I did actually really want to share it. And she was like, yeah, of course, go for it. Because like when I was working in radio, you released very little. I chose to release very little. But this feels different. This is not like a commercial entity. Let's get to the next ad break. This is more like a group of kindred spirits hanging out and and spending time with each other. So I kind of said far no. I did really want to share it with you tonight, so I've done it anyway. So tonight's show, we've got Byron Clark joining us at some stage through tonight's show. He's out at the moment, probably at about, if you're watching us live, probably at about 22:45. We're going to talk about an issue that came up on Q&A over the weekend. In fact, if you're watching now, Byron, don't even worry about joining us until we play the video. You can join us during the video so you don't have to sit around. But they were talking about hate speech laws versus hate crime laws. Now, this government's definitely not doing hate speech laws, but they are actively talking about maybe more concrete or more tangible sort of hate crime laws. And I guess why that's in the news at the moment is the painting over of the rainbow crossings. Was that a hate crime? And it seems to me to be quite a simple descriptor. One would be speech based in hate because of that, we'll say, minorities or people group status. The other one would seem to be a crime committed against that person because of their protected class, is a better word, the minority group status. But then again, we have to put that up against free speech. And we're allowed to be assholes. The only reason you need free speech is to say the most offensive things. You don't need free speech to say, lovely flowery things. And so where does that go? And of course, the perennial question, Chewy, is who gets to decide what's hate? And I know that's what we hear from people like the Free Speech Union, who you guys know I don't abide with, but it's a valid question to ask. And when the other guys are in and they're making the laws, then your guys are in and they're making the laws. It's going to be quite hard to nail down an exact definition that will sit comfortably across everyone, I guess. Anyway.
Yeah, it's a tricky one because it's kind of like you know it when you see it sort of thing, but that's not good enough when it comes to the law. It has to be even-handed and it has to be very specific and all of this sort of stuff. It's both a really interesting discussion and an incredibly frustrating one.
Yeah, no, I agree. Because basically I want people to be protected from being abused and threatened and all of those things. But I'm someone, and I've said this a time before, I'm not on the side of the Free Speech Union, but if you were to say to me, if you were to err towards more speech or less speech, I'm always leaning towards more. I don't believe there is such a thing as a free speech absolutist. I've said that a million times before, but I would always err towards more speech than less. And so then when people start to talk about hate speech laws, it does make me personally go, okay, they have to be really definitive with no grey areas and clear. And that's probably where you get the problem, Chewy, because you can, a different person sitting on a bench judging something can have a slightly different perspective. And so anyway, we won't get too heavily into that conversation. Now, that's one of our things we're going to talk about tonight. Also, did you know, Chewy, that David Seymour has done us all a service this week? He has finally told us how to protest. Yeah. We keep talking about now is not the time to protest or now is the time to protest. Well, David Seymour, very generous with his time, has finally figured that out for us. And we're also going to be having a look at Chloe Swarbrick and Brooke Van Velden from this morning. A couple of things they were talking about. The first was government's going to introduce a minimum English standard test for migrant workers, which smacks to me of the beginnings of xenophobia. If you can't say the words, because it's super important to be able to speak clearly if you're picking pears, at a certain time of the year. It really matters if you've got the English language down perfectly. So, but also they talked a bit about this gang shooting that I talked about. Now, I'm going to say something that's pretty mean. I think Brooke Van Velden is completely out of her depth. If I was of my parents' generation, I would say she has risen above her position. Because I'm going to play you some of the conversation from this morning. And in fact, I think I read something. It might have even been from Chris Trotter. In fact, I'll read this to you as well. I won't put it up on the screen because it's in my other emails. I haven't got this one, but Brooke Van Velden was on Q&A this week as well. And Jack Tame asked the question, are income tax right now in the best interest of lowering inflation? This is the paragraph. This is from Chris Trotter. And, we've got our issues with Chris Trotter, but, it says this. If looks could kill, then Tame would have died right there and then. Van Velden is a very intelligent woman, so in the very few seconds she had to formulate a response to Tame's question, she assessed the consequences of providing him with an honest answer, realised that in this case honesty would be absolutely the worst policy, and so summoning her most earnest tone, and that's what I want to talk about, her tone of voice, and with only the thinnest hint of embarrassment, she replied in the affirmative. I think Brooke Van Velden is way out of her depth. This conversation I'm about to show you parts of with Chloe from this morning, she mixes from going, she sounds like a teenager or a student, let's give her credit, a 20-year-old who is playing at being a politician. Like those, I know the script says these are the words I use, and she flips from that into a 1950s female. Like you think of the 50s mom, that kind of stuff. It's just, everything's just so wonderful. Aren't we just so very, very proud? And it really, I think it's concerning because this particular politician has a lot of influence and power in this current government from her position. So let's get into it. The first part of the conversation is that I've actually left out the question altogether. They come back to it, but they are talking about the English standard tests. And the question has already been asked. I'm not playing the question. I'm not even playing all of the answer because I want to just give you an example of the tone, the way she's speaking. And it's not just that she has a style. It's that I think it feels like she's grasping for the words. And I think it feels like she talks about Erica Stanford's policies. And you can hear it's like almost, I haven't done the work here. I haven't read it. I don't really know. And because she's not over it herself, she doesn't seem to have the capacity to answer in any sort of, I'll say it, any sort of intelligent way. Just fumbles and stumbles and feels like she's out of her depth. So let's have a look at this conversation from this morning.
I know Minister Stanford will be looking at further immigration changes in the future, but I can't make any discussion here on her behalf on those matters. But if you look at what we need to do in the short term, we do have a problem in front of us. I know that there have been lots of stories of migrant exploitation. We're seeing it in the numbers as well. And we do have to act on it. That's why we're implementing more of those minimum English language tests to make sure that we have people coming into the country who have the right skills, they have the ability to do the jobs that they're being employed to do. And we know through some of the cases... Again,
if they've been employed to pick fruit, those are the skills they need in there is to do this, kink, and do that. That's the level of skill. So that's why it screams to me of xenophobia. But look, this has got a bit of a way to go, Chewy. But if you want to comment on anything I've just said or the example I just gave quickly of the tone and stuff, you're more than welcome, of course.
I'm going to hold fire until the end.
Okay, fair enough. Here we go.
Is coming through that's not been the case.
If I can just point out as well that we've had successive governments, both those led of red and blue stripes, that have consistently pumped up the numbers of migrants coming into the country in order to enable them to uphold the economy as we presently understand it, but they're not really looking after them when they get here. So one of the other concerning things in the announcement this past weekend from Minister Stanford is the reduction in continuous years that migrants, I believe, at level 4 and level 5 can stay in the country for. We should in fact be ensuring that migrants have a pathway to residency so that they can put down roots, build lives in their communities and contribute as New Zealanders. Whereas in fact, part of this announcement continues to contribute to that revolving door, which actually makes all of us poorer.
Is it a revolving door, Brooke?
I just want to acknowledge the Queen. You know that. Talking, and now I know that Chloe's been around for longer than Brooke doing this, so I'm not going to compare them both, but that's someone who's young and so age is no barrier. I guess I'm saying age is no barrier. Because there's a brilliant answer there, well spoken, well researched, knows what she's doing, filing it on, and then we get back to Brooke and her mix of playing politician and 1950s housewife.
I don't think it's a revolving door at all. I think what we need to make really, really clear is that New Zealand is a country that accepts migrants. We are a beautiful multicultural ethnic environment from all walks of life. And I think that's really, really wonderful. But what we've got to make sure...
Did you hear the 50s housewife just quietly? That bit there? Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay.
is that we're getting people joining our beautiful country here who have the skills to do the jobs that are needed in our country, not people who are not necessarily matched to the job market with the skills that are needed.
Bizarre rhetoric, which seems a little bit devoid from kind of the policy settings and reality there. And again, we would just make it really abundantly clear that if you want to do the single biggest thing that would reduce migrant exploitation in this country, then we need to decouple work visas from single employers so that workers have that bargaining power.
Okay, there you go. Clip number one. Chewy, you wanted to hold fire? Load them up, fire away.
I think that there are a lot of things that need to change with our immigration migrant settings and that sort of thing. I think there's been so many cases of people being taken advantage of that there is something very, very wrong. I heard on Radio New Zealand late last week that currently, as it stands at the moment, visa applications, and I think primarily student and work visa applications, from one part of the world, 60% of them are getting rejected. And that is because of a combination of we don't believe you and we don't trust the agent that is putting in this application for you. And I think with a lot of this, when they look at the people that are coming here on work visas and stuff like that, there's always been that the employer, you have to have a job. You have to be coming here to do a job. You have to be sponsored by the employer. And in effect, you're kind of bonded to that employer, that one single employer, as Chloe was referencing there. Yeah. And it's not working as intended, because it takes all of the power away from that worker. They can't point out unsafe work practices. They can't point out that they're being underpaid and taken advantage of, because if they do stick their neck up and go, hey, this isn't right, well, cool, good job, fuck off.
Yeah.
They can't go anywhere else. So I think a lot of this needs to be looked at from the worker's point of view, from the person that wants to come to this country. Do I believe that ACT New Zealand First and National will do that? No, I don't. No. They'll look at it from a business point of view. And I think, there is a human in that machine that needs to be looked after. I think I don't like what I'm about to say, but I think there is an argument for having some language levels in there. And again, I'm coming at this from a different point of view. But
in saying that, do you think that's what they're saying? Or do you think that they're just dog whistling to their people about bloody migrants who can't speak our language?
Yeah. I do. But to flip that on its head, you come to a primarily English speaking country and you don't have those language skills. That takes away a lot of tools.
It does also depend, though, what you're doing, because at the moment, if you are kind of bound to that one employer, let's just say that one employer is a Filipino builder, right? Let's just say that's what it is. And you're a Filipino builder from the Philippines, and you're then bonded to that Filipino builder who speaks Philippine? Not sure the name of the language. And how does that mean that they're not going to be able to function? If they're working for someone in this country speaking primarily a language that their native language, but it's working with their employer, who cares?
Yeah, but they have to interact with, like if they needed help, how would they reach out?
Yeah,
those sort of things. Like I'm saying that I don't agree that this government is thinking it that way. I think there is merit in what they're saying, but for different reasons. Yeah, I think.
It's a bit like my vibes today about saying that some things that the Free Speech Union say I kind of agree with, but for very different reasons. So I get with you.
Very, very different.
Very different.
I'm coming at it from a worker point of view of like, how can we make sure that these people that are coming here to do these jobs aren't taken advantage of?
Yeah.
And we've seen so much of that in like since COVID and that sort of thing, of people being taken advantages for bonded jobs, being underpaid, overworked, crammed into social housing, feeling like if they stick their neck up and say, hey, look, I need help, then they're going to be deported straight away.
Yeah.
I think there are things to consider there. Do I trust Brooke to be able to do that? No.
Well, that's the other thing. Do we really buy the idea that ACT is the party to protect migrant workers from being abused? Like, do we really buy that? I mean, this is the thing, right? Why? So therefore, if we don't buy that, why are they doing it? It's because they want to keep going down that path of English first and show their supporters and their funders that they're not going to have that weird language. I'm not going to hear that in my supermarket anymore. That weird jumping and jiving. You know, that's what it's about. That's what it's about altogether.
I think there's just often turning on the taps for immigration, or turning them off in this case. It is short-term thinking. It is showing a lack of planning. A lot of people would call that social engineering or something like that, but it's like the whole idea of bringing in a migrant worker. One of the yardsticks that they need to climb over is this a job that a Kiwi can do?
Yeah.
And you know, that doesn't seem to be a barrier at all. And we look at fruit pickers and the RSA workers and that sort of thing. I want more protections for those guys, but I would agree in that case, that RSE visa, I don't think it really matters in their case whether they have perfect King's English. But again, they need the ability, or they need to have the support to say, hey, look, if you're being taken advantage of, we've got you because you've come here to do a job for us.
Yeah. No, and look, I think the point you just made about protections for the worker, because Chewy, you're a Marxist, is actually, I get it, I'm with you on that. What do you think, what is your vibe about what I said about, and I don't want to say the performance of Brooke, but out of her depth, this person who doesn't really seem to know what they're doing or what they're saying? Chris Trotter's kind of made it fairly obvious in his point as well. What do you think?
Oh, please don't bring up Chris Trotter again.
Yeah, I know.
That man has been eating lead-based paint chips like potato chips for decades. I think it's great that it's Chloe and Brooke there together, because it just shows, like there was a comment in the chat there that Chloe's face just looked like she was waiting for it, like a mother waiting for a child to stop having a tantrum in the supermarket. So you can put it back on track. I think there is a perfect contrast. You've got two young women in politics, one of whom is just so far across anything that she's asked to speak on. Every time that there's a comment, it's incredibly information dense, it's incredibly well put forward, that sort of thing. And then you have Brooke. And Brooke's hitting the bullet points, but they always feel empty. It always feels like there's nothing behind them, that she doesn't have the depth of knowledge into what she's there to speak on.
Yeah, that's
and
what
that
it
could
is.
be, and that could be an experience.
Yeah, and that, but that's what. But
Chloe's been in there for years now.
Yeah, but that's no excuse. If you've been given a ministerial role and you're inexperienced, and
sure.
that's on the leaders of these parties. If you've been given it too soon, that's on them. If you're a minister, then you got to stump up like all other ministers would. Mm-hmm. If Chloe was the minister, she wouldn't be doing this.
You've got to do the work.
Yeah, and look, I see in here as well. I got back from Queenstown mid-afternoon today, so I didn't have a chance to watch Q&A in its entirety. But yeah, I will have a good look at that interview tomorrow, and maybe we'll do it tomorrow night, even though it'll be a day later than usual. But look, let's also keep going on this, because there is more joy for us to be had, because this is the second part of the conversation, and they were talking about gang patches. Now, as I said at the start, I didn't hear anything about the news this weekend. I didn't know there'd been a shooting at a rugby game. It seems that what I've read of it now, it is something that was a localized sort of something between individuals that knew each other. Now, I'm not playing this part of it for you for expedience, but Chloe has just spent the 60 seconds before this part of the conversation, like the left always needs to do, to prostrate itself before people and going, they're very bad, it's very bad. We don't condone. The right never has to do that. The right just go at it, but the left has to go, yes, of course we don't condone, we don't do. So she's just done that. She's just gone through saying, bad guns bad, shooting bad. No, don't condone. And then we get into the substance of the rest of the conversation around what's happening.
So moving on then to policy settings, this is where I get a little bit concerned about how political rhetoric will just take us to the space of being tough on crime, tough on gangs, but actually very light on evidence. So we have a lot of evidence in this country, including from the Prime Minister's Chief Science Advisor and from the inquiry, the Royal Commission of Inquiry into Abuse in State Care, which tell us where gangs come from. And they tell us, again, that if we want to reduce people getting involved in gang lifestyles, then we need to reduce poverty. We need to reduce inequality. We need to give young people pathways to get involved in society and fix the social contract.
Brooke, I'll come to you. I mean, surely we...
You know, if you were a lecturer at university or something, you'd probably go, I have no notes. I have no notes for that answer. Perfect. Great. Spot on. Cited research. Explained it as well. This is the thing as well. The government, and we're not really going to get to it tonight, but there was a story on One News tonight about the targets the government's setting out. And one of the targets the government's setting out is there are currently 1,100 young offenders known to police. Those people who commit most of the crimes are 1,100 young offenders, right? Now, they have a target to reduce that number by 15% within the next 5 years. Now, what that is that would require policies like what Chloe's just described. My concern in that, Chewie, is if they're going to lose or reduce the number by 15% of young offenders in the next 5 years, how many of those young offenders today will be over 18 within that 5 years, hence the number being reduced purely by attrition? So we might look at that again tomorrow. Probably don't have time for that tonight. But what I was saying is when they release that data today and those, it's like, yeah, well, okay, that'd be great. Reduce the number of young offenders. That involves fence at the top of the cliff. That involves, like Chloe just said, getting involved beforehand. That doesn't involve all of your policies, which are all stick policies. But it's probably fair we let the Right Honourable Brooke Van Velden also speak to this gang shooting and what needs to be done around gangs.
We can just go watch a rugby game without the need to have to run for our lives and seek shelter somewhere because bullets are flying everywhere. What are you getting harder on crime?
Can I just say that is the worst framing for a question ever. The way he's made that question sound is like every weekend, gunshots, there's gun wars happening at rugby games, every single isolated incident between people who knew each other. Right, that's the first thing. But then again, also listen here, Brooke uses that famous phrase, they don't feel safe. Okay, so there was probably 5,000 rugby games happening in New Zealand over the weekend. And this horrific event happened at one of them. The other 4,999, you know what, Brooke? They felt safe. But this is what people do, the right does it in particular. They start to fearmonger. They start to use phrases like no one feels safe. And then their people pick it up. And then it echoes within the media. And then the journalists start talking about feeling safe to the other side. And it's all nonsense.
Is there more that your government needs to do?
I completely agree. I mean, it's scary. You know, rugby games are places for families where people should be able to take their kids and enjoy a spot of sport.
1950s.
I mean, everybody has been to a rugby game in New Zealand and walked away feeling either happy or sad for the team that's won or lost, but you don't expect to run away in fear that you're going to be shot at. That's unacceptable, and we should have no place for it. But I think this is also just the most recent example of crime that is affecting our community. I always talk to people
under your
who
government
say that they don't feel safe. They don't feel safe on the streets. They're not feeling safe when they're going around shopping mall areas. They don't feel safe now at rugby games. What I think we need to be clear on, though, is we don't have all of the facts.
They don't. So no one feels safe at rugby games. They don't feel safe. After this one isolated incident that happened at one rugby game in the year 2024. Now that's turned into they don't feel safe at rugby games.
Of this particular case and who particularly was involved. Yes, this government is going to be cracking down on crime. We have many policies to do this. Things like banning the gang insignia, to make sure that people aren't intimidated in public, getting harder on illegal firearms and making sure that we're cracking down on illegal firearms being in the community because there is a place for people who use them safely. That is not at a rugby game, and we do need to do more work.
Oh, that's what it is, Chewie. They weren't aware. Yeah, they weren't aware no firearms at the rugby because it didn't have a sign on the door. Now, this is finished, but I do, because obviously TV runs out of time, I do want to just play the end, which gives you Chloe's response to this as they're wrapping.
There, and I know Nicole McKee, as the Associate Minister for Justice, has many policies in this area.
All right, Brooke, Chloe, thank you so much for your time. That's all we've got.
So much more that could be said. Thank you very much.
So much more. So much more. Brooke, thank you.
So, yes, obviously they could have gone a long way. Go for it.
I recognise that look from Chloe, as Chloe is a fellow neurodivergent, similar to me, is that thing of there's something so outrageous that's just been said and it's not your turn, so you need to sit there and take it. It's just outrageous. This is what a right-wing government wants. It's worked overseas. It fucking works here. Is just build that fear. Like this event that happened at the weekends is so out the gate, even for the gangs. Like it's just so out in the open. These guys are going to get caught by the end of the week. The police are already following strong lines of inquiry.
But hang on, Chewy.
The weapon that they used is already illegal.
No,
it's
Chewy,
like,
now people aren't safe. Now people feel they're not safe to go to rugby. Chewy, did you not hear? We just got told by a Minister of the Crown. Now people this weekend aren't going to attend any rugby games anywhere in the country because now people don't feel safe to attend the rugby, Chewy.
it's that extrapolation, right? Like even up in Auckland, and I don't want to belittle the things that happened up in Auckland and that with ram raiding and all of that sort of stuff. They always draw it out of like people in the community everywhere in New Zealand. Ordinary New Zealanders are scared. I'm not scared because I'm at the other end of the fucking country and we have different issues here. But it's that classic right wing, we talk about the vibes that they're trying to build. And in this case, the vibe is society is broken and you should be scared. You should be scared, and we're the only people that can fix it. It's so classic. It's been repeated around the world. We're the only ones with the solution. It's stuff that we've done before and it's never worked. But this time, I promise, because you want to take your little kiddywink down to the mall or down to the rugby or all of that sort of stuff, and you just can't because black power's everywhere, as you know, in rural Southland. It's all vibes. It's no technicalities. Like she's talking about, this wouldn't happen if we have a ban on gang patches. Well, then those guys would be down there with red hoodies or blue hoodies. We've spoken about this at length. It's not going to change anything. I would be surprised if those guys were wearing gang patches and doing something this blatant because it's fucking stupid. And if they are, it's going to make them easier to catch. Just that. And I love the stumble into talking about illegal weapons. But, some people are allowed guns. But, like, we don't want to crack down on the guns too hard. She almost caught herself with that one.
Yeah.
It's just foolish.
All right. Is there anything with checks you want to get to? Because what we'll do, because Byron's in the waiting room, we'll go to do the story about free speech, hate speech now. Free speech, hate crime now. And then we'll do the joy of our lives that David Seymour's finally given us the rules for protesting. Anything you want to do before that?
I've got one comment that I really like.
Yep.
Brooke fully understands the hood. Clearly has a lot of experience and absolutely will get this shit locked down with her stern demeanour and Margaret Thatcher outfit.
All right, let us welcome to the show, friend of the show, author, all sorts of things actually. We'll just say g'day Byron. Byron Clark. G'day man, how are you?
Kia, I'm good, thank you. Doing
well? Had a good night? You been out?
I have, yeah. I've been out at an iftar event, so first time going to one of those. So that was a new experience.
Explain that to the people. What is it?
So this is when during Ramadan, when Muslims break the fast at sunset and prayers and shared meals. So I was fed very well. I think since most people there probably hadn't eaten since sun up, they give you a lot of food. And being a guest, everyone was offering me more food and being one of the few Pākehā people there, people were checking that it's not too spicy for me all the time. I said, don't worry. Behind this pale facade, there's an iron stomach. So,
hey, Byron, we've got you on to have a chat with us because it's it's not really a news topic. It sort of is, but sort of isn't. It's more of a, I guess, theory topic, maybe, I don't know, ideas topic around hate speech laws versus hate crime laws. We've got an article from Q&A this morning. It's about 5.5 minutes. I don't think we'll play all of it, but we'll start just by starting this off, get the vibe of it, and then we'll go from there. So Q&A this morning, yesterday morning, they were talking a bit about hate crime laws. At the same time, the government's moving away from hate speech laws, but they're moving towards hate crime laws. Let's have a bit of a look as to what they've got to say.
Police are calling a paint attack on a central Auckland rainbow crossing a hate crime.
We don't have specific hate crime offences in New Zealand.
Wellington lawyer Graham Edgler.
When you're talking about hate crime, you're talking about things which are already illegal. So assaulting someone is illegal, burgling someone's house, vandalism is illegal. And so all those things are already crimes. So it's a question of in what way is it worse, or how do you define it to be worse because of the nature of the victim? Certain sorts of things would be easier to prosecute as hate crimes. The difference between vandalism, throwing a brick through a window, which could have a hate element to it, versus vandalism, painting a swastika on the side of a Jewish person's house.
But a hate crime law may be on the horizon. The Law Commission has been instructed to look at hate-motivated offences.
As a coalition agreement said, we've stopped them from carrying on with hate speech legislation reform because that's not something we're going to do. But we have asked them to continue their work on hate crimes.
So in saying that, we'll let this play out. We won't start the conversation too much now. It's interesting that the national government is still pushing towards hate crime laws. Now, we can talk about what the difference are, but I mean, I guess if you had to ask me what my bet would have been, it would have been that they'd probably move away from those as well, but they're not. I don't know whether that's good, bad, or indifferent, but either of you guys want to share anything on that before we keep going?
I think the thing with, we're not going to do hate speech, but we are going to do hate crimes. I think the thing that they've missed there is that it doesn't just start with the crime. It's the incitement, it's the working up to it and that sort of thing. Again, we talk about getting into something early. Someone talking in a message board about something, somebody's got to do something about the local mosque and all of this sort of stuff. That it's not a crime. Maybe it should be.
Byron?
I mean, one thing it made me think back to when I was studying criminology quite a few years ago now. But one of the key things I took away from that class I took when I was an undergraduate at university was crime is normal in any society, but the rate of crime changes based on various factors. So if you're wanting to reduce crime, there are policies you can put in place that will reduce the rate of crime. And I think if we're going to start looking more at hate crime, and I think what would be really good is just documenting when a crime is hate motivated, which I understand. I think police are already starting to do that. Yep. And I think what we're going to find from that, though, is that we could probably reduce hate motivated crime if we do something about the spread of hate speech. And I think we can compare, hate crime here to hate crime in countries in Europe where there are much stronger hate speech laws. And probably what we're going to find from looking at that is that if we want to reduce those kinds of crime, doing something about the spread of hate speech online, whether that is legislative or whether that is through different policies for the social media platforms, or whether it's something else again, that's probably going to be what this data is going to lead us to.
When they were talking about it in there, the lawyer said it's already illegal, and then he went about the hate crimes. He went on to start by saying, how is it worse? I thought to make something a hate crime, for example, it would be, what's the reason behind it? It may or may not be worse, but if they're committing the crime because the person's Jewish, or because the person's African American, or because whatever. To me, if it was going to be a hate crime, I guess the same as hate speech, is if the reason you're doing it is because of that person's protected class. That's how I think about it. But the gentleman we're looking at right now is the spokesman from the Islamic Federation of New Zealand. They've obviously got some things to say about this. Let's keep going, eh?
We actually thoroughly confused what he's actually wanting.
In a prayer room off Lambton Quay, Abdul Razak shares his astonishment that hate speech has been dropped. He heads the Royal Commission Committee for Local Islamic Organisations.
They're researching the possibility of bringing in hate crime legislation. You're supportive of the hate crime legislation?
Absolutely, but the two are so interlinked. And this clearly stated in the Royal Commission report that you need to look at the expression of hate as part of the hate crime legislation.
Following the Royal Commission report, hate speech reforms were proposed by former Justice Minister Chris Farfoy, watered down by the next Labour Justice Minister Kiri Allen, and vigorously campaigned against by the coalition parties in the lead-up to the election.
Our simple belief is that in a free and open society, the best response to speech that you don't like is more speech, rather than police prosecutions.
The Free Speech Union is claiming a chunk of the credit for the dumping of hate speech.
Without a doubt, we were the leaders in the space saying that hateful speech can be a problem, but censorship is not the answer.
Very good one. Scotland's new hate crime laws were expected to meet a backlash, and here it was on day one.
Scotland's new law, which came into effect earlier this past week, will be keenly observed from here.
Scotland has changed it. It's been somewhat controversial, and I think their law appears to sort of both address hate crime as well as hate speech.
What we've seen in the UK generally, and specifically in Scotland, is this as an ideological rod to beat the backs of opinions that are out of favour at the moment.
It's all about the wording. If you get the wording wrong, you're going to have the same disaster that Scotland is now facing.
You think that's a disaster?
Of course it's a disaster. They didn't have that discussion. So now you have a situation like a very prominent person, J.K. Rowling, saying, hey, I can be accused of hate crime. If I believe in a two-gender approach, it's hate crime.
So I actually think that's quite a good place to start the conversation proper, because you guys tell me if you took this differently, right? But what I just heard Abdul Razak say is that he doesn't think J.K. Rowling should be charged with a hate crime for acknowledging, saying, stating there are only two genders. But there are others out there who think that should be hate speech or a hate crime. And that comes back to that part about who decides. And I think it's a valid question to ask, even though some horrific Atlas network-backed groups also ask that question. Byron, what about your thoughts?
Well, my understanding is that under that legislation they have in Scotland, she wouldn't be charged with a hate crime for saying that, because she has said that, and Scottish police have said, no, we're not going to be going and arresting J.K. Rowling. So I think that demonstrates that there's going to be a high bar for hate speech. And that's what the case has been here as well, when there's been proposals for changes to our existing legislation. Like we already have on the books in the Human Rights Act from 1993, a clause that makes it a crime to incite racial disharmony. So based on somebody's national or ethnic or racial origins. And the time that clause has been used is I think twice, maybe three times in that 30 years, because there's an incredibly high bar. And a lot of what was proposed when we were talking about hate speech laws was just amending that to include religious groups and to include the LGBT community and the disabled. There was also talk of maybe moving it out of the Human Rights Act and into the Crimes Act. But we allowed the debate to really get hijacked by, I think, some disingenuous actors who talked as if suddenly the government was going to come and arrest you for posting, a woman as an adult human female on Twitter or something like that, which was never really going to be the case.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they love that slippery slope argument, and they love shifting the goalposts a little bit. It's they know exactly what they're doing. Like I said earlier in the show, You know, you could go out there on a message board and you could go, somebody should do something about the local mosque.
Mm.
You know, and that wouldn't be hate speech. It's too wide. You know, it could. What do they mean by someone should do something? I mean, you would be able to look at that comment and give it some context and go, oh, well, the guy said it on a white nationalist bulletin board. I think we can work that out. But it's just like you have to prove it. And that's where the argument lies. All of these people are going, oh, it'll be incredibly easy for me to be black bagged in the middle of the night for just saying this controversial comment. It's not like that at all. If it's a crime, it has to be provable, and it has to survive being defended and all of that sort of thing as well. You know, there's only two genders, or all Catholic priests are pedophiles. You know, all of these sort of things that you could say. You know, they're not going to hit that high bar. But I think to ignore the fact that hate speech exists and there is a very clear link to an incitement or a ramping up to a hate crime is just, it's not very well thought out. I think there's a debate there. I can sure, free speech, have at it. But there are people being disingenuous and they're not being honest actors about that discussion.
I think the idea of a call to action, because I think about it, and I've been jotting down notes while I've been talking about it. Like, for me, hate speech, hate crimes, they have to impact a protected class. What is a protected class? And I wrote down a protected class is one you can't become one. Like, you can't join Māoridom. You know, you can't. But then I thought but you can become disabled.
You join a religion.
So it's not that. But the idea of a call to action, like a call to violence, like, to me, that seems to be the criminal act now. So because the crime that's happening, if it's a physical act, you can measure it, you can weigh it up, you can say, yes, the swastika was painted, right? We can see it, there's something you can feel, touch and say, and you can draw attention to it. If it's just spoken words and it's being an arsehole towards someone in a racist tone, which we obviously abhor, but there's no call for any kind of action or violence. For me, it's the violence thing within the speech that is the line. Now, I'm not sure, I don't know too much about the Scottish rules and what they've brought in, but I'll do some more reading this week. If you know any more about it than Byron, does that have to do with like a call to action, a call to violence, or can it just be for the words that have been spoken, in a specific way?
I'm not too sure, to be honest. I need to.
But what do you think about the hate speech? The hate speech, how to make that tangible? Like, I mean, in an ideal world, and this is probably not ideal, or it can't happen. In an ideal world, you'd want it to be a bipartisan agreement, so therefore it's not seen as bloody lefties or the right wing lunatics or whatever. I don't know if that's possible. Is it possible?
I think it's possible. I mean, there's all sorts of issues that we do have a bipartisan consensus on, and I think we've allowed this issue to become a really divided one. And I think part of the way that that's happened is those minor coalition partners, looking to dog whistle a bit to some of the more unpleasant elements in our society by making this a big deal. I think if you think about politics in the immediate aftermath of the mosque shootings in 2019, at that time, probably we did have a bit of a bipartisan consensus that maybe we needed some change around issues like hate speech. And it's really only been, over the 5 years since, with all this campaigning from the likes of the Free Speech Union and elements within ACT and New Zealand First, that we've really started to see that shift. So I think things could potentially shift in the other direction if this issue could be, seen as something that is bigger than the divide between the centre left and the centre right, and is more something we want to think about, what kind of society do we want to have, and what legislation will we have that isn't just going to get flipped back and forth between different governments, but which will become like a more core part of what kind of society we have.
Because it needs to be something more than just offending someone, eh? It needs to be something more
definitely,
than that.
yeah.
Maybe that's where the thing is. Chewy, we'll wrap this up in a tick. What do you want to add in towards the end of this chat, Chewy?
I just want, like, there's people going on in the chat about, like, who gets to decide what hate speech is, and this is exactly my point. I kind of wish that Free Speech Union were, and again, not a union. These people that are just anti it would actually get into the discussion with good faith. You know, they just don't want it at all, and they're just throwing out some really hyperbolic answers and examples and that sort of thing. And I just wish that the debate would be had with some intellectual honesty, because if we can get through that and everybody gets to prove their case right, which is exactly what they should be for, right? More speech and discussion. We want to have a discussion about this because it's a real problem. You know, like, we're just thrashing things out of, like, what could be the shape of it. Whatever it is has to be strong enough to hold up in a court of law, be flexible enough that it stands up to the test of time, changes in society and current affairs and all of that sort of stuff, and that it can't be weaponized against us if a government, you know, there's a change of government or something like that. Like, there's been lots of times where people have been, you know, they've been on the up of an argument, and then it's turned around and changed, and you know, you've got search and seizure laws deployed against you. You've got the police infiltrating activist groups and all sorts of stuff like that. You know, it has to stand up to that. You've got to build a law that can't be weaponized against yourself. But I think the way that we are and where the discussion is these days, what is able to be said online, the way that people are able to connect with people that might share these abhorrent views, we need to be able to build something that shows us what that is, shows us what the shape of it is, and to be able to stop these things from happening before they get to something like what happened in Christchurch. You know, there's a lot of, you know, I'm not the biggest fan of religion, but often religion is a button point for people to be attacked or victimized or that sort of thing. That's a protected category. Disabled people. The LGBTQI community is obviously copping a whole bunch of flack. You know, you can sit there and you can go, I don't agree with the gay lifestyle all day long. Have at it. The moment that you say that all gays are pedophiles and should be shot on sight, that's a very different statement. You know, and that, I think, goes back to you saying about a call to action, a specificity. But then people can get around that, right? Like what I was saying, somebody should do something about the local mosque. We all know what I'm talking about, but I'm not going to say it because I'm not crazy.
That's the grey area where laws would have to be clearer, and could they be? But yeah, I think I like what I hear you guys saying, and I'm probably a victim of it, is to not be dragged by the extremes that have been used as the examples. If I don't know what the Scottish law is, I'll have to read into it. But if there is a sensible middle ground, then maybe that's the path to start to have a look at, whatever that is. Anything from you to finish off with, Byron? You are our guest, of course.
Yeah, I guess the point, and I'm sorry, I lost audio for a few minutes earlier, so sorry if this has already been mentioned, but one of the things we do have in existing laws is it's very clear cut if you threaten an individual, but we don't have something similar for, you know, threatening a group of people. So if somebody says they're going to kill me, you know, they've likely committed a crime, I can contact police. If somebody says they're going to kill Muslims, they're going to kill trans people, they're going to kill Jewish people, etc., police probably still want to know about it, but it's not actually a crime that is prosecutable. So that's maybe an example of where, you know, well, maybe that's a more clear-cut example where perhaps some laws could be changed, and, you know, there'd still be some grey areas, but that's always going to be the case.
Probably would also have to be, I can't think of the right word, but a genuine threat. You know, like something that's tangible. Like we lose the Rugby World Cup, I could fucking kill an Aussie right now. very different. There'd have to be some kind of, I guess, evidence that this is something that could therefore happen as well. But but I guess we'll keep talking about it. Hey, Brian, thanks for joining us tonight, mate. I appreciate you giving up some of your time whilst you're trying to digest your dinner, which I'm sure you'll be out for the next 2 hours to do. All right, dude. All the best. Appreciate your time.
Cheers, Brian.
I want to mention this one right here. This super chat right here from Peter. There it goes. Chloe's expressions rival Amelia Clark. Now, I'm assuming Amelia Clark, of course, the mother of dragons. We're talking about the eyebrows. That's probably the thing. That bit. That sort of thing.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about. That's a like that. Oh my God, yes. I have to say, I want to say something, but I'm not allowed. It's not my turn.
All right. Yeah, look, sometimes we do this. It's not really a talk back or a talk topic. It's just something we will get to. It's a news story of the day, and it's something that I think we need to continue to talk about. Right. Let's get to our well, that's not the one. That's the news story. Here we go. No, that's not the one. It's this one here. There it is. I think I got there. Is it that? So thankfully we want to say thanks to David Seymour. David Seymour has finally, every time there's like a mass shooting in America, they go, this is not the way to protest, or now is not the time, and you always ask the question, well, when is the time?
That's so predictable.
When do we know? When is the time to protest? Please someone educate us as to when is the best time to protest. Well, happily and luckily, David Seymour has filled that gap, and he's decided to tell us all when the best time to protest is. Let's have a listen to this story from last night. Oh, actually, this is from Friday, and I just also wanted to acknowledge the strike for climate change. That's what it's all about. Let's have a look.
Raised the ire of student climate protesters by telling them they should have been at school instead.
Tens of thousands marched in towns and cities across the country today, demanding action on climate change, the war in Gaza, and on treaty rights. Alexa Cook reports.
Taking over the capital's Golden Mile, these students are skipping school for a cause. Demanding more climate action from those in power.
It is an issue we are not willing to turn our backs on. Clearly, today we have shown that to this government.
20 protests were held around the Motu, with crowds filling Auckland's streets.
I can, from the other side of town, Chewy, I can sense your pride welling up in you. I can feel it through the screen.
Yep. And marching through New Plymouth.
I feel responsible. I feel the consequences are happening.
I care about my world.
The school strike for climate is a global movement that began in Sweden in 2018. Although in New Zealand, protests now include a wide range of issues, including honouring Te Tiriti, the fast tracking of legislation, and a call to free Palestine. Someone who isn't on board with students taking time off school to protest is ACT leader David Seymour.
If they really care about the issue, they should protest on a day without missing school.
How do you feel about...
So David Seymour has given us the criteria because he said, quote, so remember, what he's saying is they don't care, because what he says is if they really cared about an issue, they should protest on a day without skipping school. Now, I'll guess as well, if you were to ask him about freezing works going on strike, a bunch of workers going on, you might hear from his mouth, if they really cared about an issue, they should protest on a day they're not at work. That feels like it would have the same vibe to it. So basically, we're all blessed now that David Seymour has given us the rules, finally someone, as to when to protest. And what he's saying is, when you've got some spare time and you don't have another commitment that I deem more important. There's more to play, Chewy, but I can see you bubbling, so have a crack, son.
Yes, they should have definitely ordered this climate strike on Saturday. The march to Parliament would have been very effective to shout at a building that was empty.
Yep.
What an idiot.
Yep.
What an absolute idiot. Let's go to another really successful protest. You know what? The Springbok protests were really inconvenient to the people going to the rugby.
Yeah.
And it really, so if they could head their protest on a day that there isn't a rugby game on, that'd be great.
Yeah, but no, because if they
is inconvenient.
Yeah, no, but the thing is, sure, if in 1981, if they really cared about the issue, they would protest on a day without rugby. I mean, if they really cared about it, that's what they do, according to David Seymour.
This comment from him was so like I was waiting for it. He's going to say it. He's going to say it that they should have chosen a different time to protest, that they were just trying to wag school. And look, the media's slightly to blame here as well, because they use the term they're skipping school. Fuck no, they're not skipping school. It's an organised move. Like, skipping school is bunking off fourth period to go to McDonald's or smoke weed down the back of the fucking bike sheds or something. This isn't skipping school. These guys have to wear the consequences of what people like David Seymour are setting in stone now. Like this idea that the teenagers, they're too young, they don't know, they're not doing it in the way that they should, and once they're older they'll get it, and all of this sort of stuff is so demeaning. Like, if I was organising one of these strikes, I'd do it again. I'd do it again, more and more and more. Like, every time he opens his trap and says, "No, not like this," these stupid kids, do it again. Do it to his house. I don't know. Saturday, go to his house.
So you're saying they're learning from negative reinforcement. They should do the opposite of what David Seymour says.
Oh, look, if someone tells you to stop doing the thing, then the only answer is to do more of the thing.
Let's get to the end of this, because some of the students give David Seymour their thoughts as well.
Missing school.
How do you feel about David Seymour telling you all to get back to school?
Mind your own business. Get back to your job.
He has no idea what's going on outside of his office.
In Taranaki, they even created a new chant for him.
Organisers say this is the largest protest of its kind in New Zealand to date, and it's because all these young people are feeling so disconnected from the new coalition government. They feel powerless and voiceless, and say those in charge are ignoring the climate crisis.
And the people who are passionate about it.
The environment is really important to us.
How are you feeling being amongst all this?
It's kind of scary, but I think it's really important as well.
Students were joined by parents and grandparents too.
We're grandmothers who really care about the future of this world for our grandchildren.
Why are you both here today?
For my children's future, and I've got a child over there. She's concerned about her future.
A future that's looking increasingly bleak for them, but still worth fighting for. Alexa Cook, News Hub.
And just think about what these kids are doing. They're talking about, putting legislation through under urgency. They're talking about Palestine. They're talking about the climate. I mean, and what politician, whether you agree or disagree with their thing, would want to hinder teenagers from getting involved in those hot button issues? Imagine the 35-year-olds that they're building when they're 17 and they're doing that. I mean, what politician would like to go? It's like if you were a very good musician and you had these young people who were joining a band and they were playing thrash metal, something you hated. Would you go, no, stop it, no, get away, no? Or would you go, to yourself, I don't like your music, but I need to encourage you in the skill set that you're showing to move on to be an even better musician in 10 years from now? It's fascinating. It's fascinating.
Here's a question for you, Pat. When was the first time you went on a protest march? How old were you?
Not at school, probably university. So probably 18, 19.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it was probably over university fees from memory, maybe.
My first protest march was probably the Urawera raids. So I would have been in my early 20s,
right?
Before I went on a march. Now, I was politically active when I was a teenager and that sort of thing, but certainly not to the point of going on a march. And I think the fact that Seymour's come out so strongly, dumbly but strongly against them, just illustrates a point that a right-wing government is terrified of a politically active teenager.
Yeah.
Because if they get politically active, they'll stay politically active. And I think the comment about these kids feeling disconnected from the current government, that is something that we really need to look on. Like, I think if you look at the UK now, you can see there's a whole generation of people that were disconnected from their government that thinks the government doesn't give a fuck about them. And if that continues, and I think luckily here in New Zealand we don't have the system where that will continue. You know, we change quite often, but these kids need to get out there and say what issues are important to them, because they can't vote. We won't let them vote. So how else are they going to communicate what's important to them? Like when it comes to climate change, these kids have to live with the consequences of decisions being made now and that have been made before they were alive. Now, is this the generation that is going to have a shorter lifespan for the first time? I think there's a really good chance of that. Climate is changing that quickly. So, yeah, maybe they go on a march every now and then. Maybe it needs to escalate from them. But, like, if that's the response that they're going to get from a government, oh, you should do it on your weekends, then that's just A, stupid, B, disrespectful, and that doesn't acknowledge any of the things that they brought to the table as being important to them.
Very good, sir. Well done. Well spoken, Chewy. Here. All right.
The other thing, sorry, there was a thought there that I was going to lead with, and then I never forgot it. The idea of kids going to school is to learn something, right? Do you think those kids learned something that day?
100%. Yeah, of course.
You know, how many skills have been learnt there? How to organise, you know, how to be politically active. Like, that there is a process, there is actions that you can take to affect change. That is an incredibly important lesson. So, yeah, they weren't in school doing formal learning, but they were learning.
All right, dude.
That's the story.
There's your story. Thanks for joining us tonight, team. Lovely to have you all on board for this evening. Is there anything else? There's a few chats you've started. Anything else you want to get before we head off for the night, Chewy?
I like people calling out the first protest that they went to and that sort of thing.
Oh, yeah.
Kim NZG in the mid-90s protesting French nuclear testing in the Pacific. Yep. Actually, there wasn't a march where I was, but I do remember being a very earnest 14 or 15-year-old writing a letter to the editor of the Timaru Herald. That was it's certainly an issue that I felt very strongly at the time. But yeah, I think it's important that kids feel that know that this is something that can happen.
All right, guys. I'm just going to go back to my happy space just for 10 seconds. Just a bit. Hang on. Oh, okay. All right. Back again. Thanks for joining us tonight. We'll be back tomorrow night from 9 p.m. for another edition of Big Hero News. Remember, if you want to be a part of what we do, patreon.com/Big Hero News. I think we'll do a meetup this weekend because I've now got some time again in our life. So if you're a paid member of the Patron, then you'll get an invite at some stage this week about meeting up on. We did Saturday 1 p.m. last time. Maybe if you want to mention in the chat at some stage through this week, we've been doing 11 a.m. Saturday. So 11 a.m. Saturday or 1 p.m. Saturday, which works better for you people who are coming on? And I haven't seen in the chat anywhere anyone mention merch. Before we get off here, I'm assuming everyone's received their merch by now. If any of you guys in the chat are people who did do the kind of buy one get one free merch, it'd be good to know if they've actually come through. I ran out of time to send off all the what are they called? The tracking numbers. I do still have them if people's merch hasn't been through. But if you are in the chat right now and you got Gold, you're the one that I know the courier's messed up. Gold, I've got you in hand, sir. I know what you're. We've got one person with the crew t-shirts, Chewy, because the crew t-shirt on sign up thing didn't work properly, so I pulled it again. So Gold is the one lucky person to have a crew t-shirt, and this is outside of school now. We shouldn't be doing this, but the courier from some reason didn't pick it up over the weekend, so I'm going to take it to the post shop today. Oh, yep, good. See, people got their stuff. I got a hat too. Good. Everyone's got their bits and pieces. Very good. All right, guys, we will talk to you super soon. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you tomorrow night from 9 p.m. for another edition of Big Hero News. Thanks for all the kind words at the start of the show and a few of the nasty ones as well. because you got to have a mix in life. Chewy, thank you, sir. Loving your flag. Do you know what? This is my protest. This is my indication of my support. It's a bit of a sad one, but it's the there's a Apple Watch has got colouring at the moment, so you can wear it on you. Isn't it interesting how two little colours like that, you know what they are. You know what it is immediately. It's just the colours. It's nothing else, and you know what it is immediately. So, all right. Thanks, Joey. You're a beautiful man.
No worries, man.
Thank you all.
I know.
And we will talk to you tomorrow night from 9 p.m. All right. Be safe, everyone. Ho-roo.
Cheers, fam.